That's right. Now, say my name.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on buckeyegrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! Can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
It's Indiana Week here on the Unscripted Ohio Podcast on the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. I am your host, Kyle Lamb. We are here by BuckeyeGrove.com, as well as our title sponsor, JFQ Lending. All of your mortgage and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye license in 33 states and more on the way. Please check them out at jfqlending.com. We're also here with support from Go Bus with over 40 stops across Ohio, with popular destinations like the Hocking Hills, Mohican State Park, and many of Ohio's big cities. Visit them at ridegobus.com or give them a call, 1-888-95-GO-BUS. So, a couple things to go over. First, Ohio State got a football commitment in the class of 2021 from a kid by the name of Reed Carrico. He is a linebacker from Ironton, Ohio. If you are not familiar with him, you should be, or you will be very, very quickly. He's kind of a big deal. This kid is a really good playmaker, versatile, athletic, strong. A lot to like about him. He is the fifth verbal commitment in the 2021 recruiting class for Ohio State football. That's a big deal. Mark Gibler, recruiting analyst extraordinaire for BuckeyeGrove.com, will be along here later in the show. We'll talk about his commitment as well as the 5 commitments in that class now, which currently, as it stands in the recruiting composite rankings, they are number 3, despite the fact that 2 teams ahead of them have 12 and 8 commitments respectively, and Ohio State has just 5. So they're off to a fantastic start. We'll talk to Mark about that. We'll also kind of look back at what Ohio State did against Cincinnati with with Buckeye Grove football analyst Ross Fulton. If you haven't heard Ross before, if you're kind of new to this Unscripted Ohio thing, Ross does a great job of breaking down what happened, the X's and O's, the in-depth analytics of college football. Ross looks for all of that, watches games with a keen eye. I think you'll like Ross if you haven't heard him before. So he'll be coming up in a few minutes as we dissect what happened against Cincinnati this past weekend. Let me clarify a few things. I want to defend myself just a little bit. On the last episode we had last week, I was on Monday, I came out and said Justin Fields, by the way. I think Justin Fields is the most talented quarterback ever to play at Ohio State. And I firmly believe that. Guys and gals, I realize it's 2 games. But let me clarify. I'm not saying Justin Fields is the best quarterback to play at Ohio State. But I think he is the most talented. And I don't feel like I need to justify this too much, but I do want to explain it. Because, look, there are a lot of guys that come through, and you can see flashes every once in a while, but, they flash, but then you don't see it for another 15, 20 snaps or 3 or 4 drives, or sometimes games at a time. With Justin, you can see all of this right away. You don't need to wait 10 more games to see his talent and potential. It jumps out at you. If you're watching, it really does. You see the arm strength. You see the touch on the ball. You see the ability to scan the field, to spread it around to different receivers. You see the ability to run. He can escape the pocket. He can go 0 to 60, and I don't know what a good analogy is for a quarterback running the ball compared to 0 to 60 in a car accelerating, but he can go very quickly up the field. He has all of the physical traits, and it's not that Ohio State has never had a quarterback like that. Terrell Pryor, Braxton Miller, Troy Smith, JT Barrett, these are all guys that have had physical traits. But when you put everything together, the arm strength, the touch, the vision, the accuracy, the the ability to run, the ability to escape the pocket, all of this combined, it is clear Justin Fields jumps off the map. So far in his career with Georgia combined, he's got 17 touchdowns accounted for and 0 turnovers. Okay, he's averaging almost 9 yards an attempt. And for your education, only Dwayne Haskins is the only other guy in Ohio State history that has done over 8.3, I think it is. So if he were to finish at 9 or above, that's very elevated territory. But you add in the running threat. Remember, Dwayne Haskins averaged over 10 yards per attempt for his career, which is impressive. But Dwayne Haskins also doesn't run the ball. He doesn't run the ball hardly at all. Career 1.9 yards per attempt rushing the ball. Justin Fields right now is bordering on 6 yards a carry. So he has those physical skills. He has those traits, those attributes. I don't feel at all ashamed, even two games into his Ohio State career, saying Justin Fields is the most talented quarterback ever at Ohio State. That doesn't mean he's the best. Doesn't mean he's going to live up to the accolades or the talent. But remember, he is the number 3 quarterback all time in the composite rankings. Those generally go back to 1999. So when you say all time, it's really about a 20-year span. It's not actually all time, but still, in 20 years, he's the number 3 rated quarterback coming out of high school and going into college. So, it's not just me saying this. It is also the recruiting analytics, the recruiting scouts. He's a big deal. He's got the unlimited potential for Ohio State, and I stand behind that. I'm not saying he's the best. There's a long way to go for that, but he is the most talented. But I will say this, I'm also going to get giddy for you and be giddy with you about the Ohio State defense, because through 2 games right now, this is definitely an improved unit that we're talking about. We see the speed, and athleticism and speed was never Ohio State's problem in the first place. I know you can go off on a tangent and single out guys like Tuff Borland that are not as fast, but as a whole, the Ohio State defense last year was not suffering from a lack of team speed. That was never the issue. It was tackling. It was being out of position. It was being slow to react, which, by the way, can make a defense look slower. If you're not recognizing the play in front of you and you're slow to read, you can be out of position, which actually makes you look slower than what you are. Pete Werner, I saw a lot of people on Twitter last year inexplicably calling Pete Werner slow. Guys, Pete Werner was a track star in the 200 and 400 meter dash. I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but Pete Werner was a really, really good athlete in high school. Still is a really good athlete. He runs really fast. So anybody calling Pete Werner slow, I got to knock on the old noggin and see if it's hollow inside, because that couldn't be further from the truth. But team speed was not the problem last year. It was the recognition and being slow to react, and that gets guys out of place and makes them look slow. So this year, now that they're reacting quicker with the new defensive scheme and being in a different place at the time of the snap, they're getting to the ball, flying to the ball a lot faster, and you can see the speed all over the place. On the defensive line, the linebackers, the defensive backs, these guys swarm to the ball. Through 2 games so far, they're giving up 1.9 yards per carry, 5.9 yards per pass, which it's not great. It's not phenomenal. But overall, 3.8 yards per play. Last year it was 4.2. The year before, in the first 2 games, it was 5.6. So you can see the improvement happening in front of you. The competition is suspect. Take it with a grain of salt. But we're just looking at where they're at early in the year, and they are certainly improved. And they're going to get better. You've got Jonathan Cooper. You've got Tyreek Smith. You've got Tyler Friday. You've got all these guys coming out or coming back in from injuries on the defensive end position, and then you throw them in the mix with the Chase Youngs and all the guys inside that have been making plays. Devon Hamilton looking really sharp early. This Ohio State defense line, as far as numbers go, if they all get healthy, kind of reminded me a little bit of the Florida State defensive lines of the 90s, late 90s, mid to late 90s. those were the teams that really, those Florida State teams really got the trend going of rotating defensive linemen. It's really important now because of the number of plays going up per game. The tempo of games has gone way up, so it's important to have second-team defensive linemen playing a lot of snaps and second-team linebackers, especially linebackers, because you have got so many different types of offenses now, even though conceptually a lot of them are based on the spread. With different offenses, you like to have different types of linebackers. You know, Tough Portland is great in rundowns for run support, but having a Baron Browning, an athletic linebacker that can step in for him and cover slot receivers on third down, as well as reacting to quarterback draws or read plays, it's important to have both types of linebackers, and that's where Ohio State is really strong this year because they have the depth at every position, and they've got interchangeable guys that can play different types of styles, and that's where Ohio State defense, I think, is in really good shape, and that's why I think this is a real deal for the Ohio State D. Will it be a championship-level defense? Remains to be seen. A lot of tests coming up later in the year. Interestingly enough, I think the bigger challenges for Ohio State is going to be an opposing defenses, not so much opposing offenses. Right now, I think the offenses, outside of maybe Wisconsin, who looks really sharp under first-year quarterback Jack Cohn, I'm not sure that the Big Ten offenses right now are up to par where they've been in maybe a couple years past. Nebraska is a good offense, not a great defense. So Nebraska will be a tough test for this Ohio State D. But the other teams that come to mind, Penn State, Michigan State, more defensive oriented. Maryland, by the way, does look like a juggernaut offense, but we'll see if that continues and how high of a level they play throughout the season. So anyhow, that's it for me as far as talking about the Ohio State D. It'll be an interesting challenge to see what they do against Indiana, a more pure spread offense, not exactly a high-level offense, not a great talented quarterback, not a lot of big-time receivers or running backs, but they will present a schematic challenge for Ohio State. We'll see how disciplined the Buckeyes remain this Sunday in Bloomington. Again, that is a noon kickoff on Fox.
Ross Fulton is here with his whiteboard to break down what the Buckeyes and their opponents are doing on the field. Can't see the whiteboard? Close your eyes and imagine really hard. It's time to go inside the X's and O's with Ross.
Pain heals. Chicks dig scars. Glory lasts forever.
Ross, let's jump right into it. You're coming from live from the airport. I know when people are hearing you, it's not going to be live, but you are live right now in the airport terminal. That's how dedicated you are to giving the listeners the expertise and the insight. I appreciate you jumping on and your busy schedule as you're on the go.
Happy to do so. Sorry if there's background noise, but I'm currently waiting for my plane as they clean the vomit from the flight beforehand. So lots of fun stuff.
Yeah, if you're having a bad day, it could be worse. You could be at the airport waiting on vomit to be cleaned up. So
exactly.
Ross, let's jump into it. First, big picture stuff. Ohio State looked really, really good against Cincinnati on Saturday. What were your overall impressions and anything that you – I guess every game and every performance needs to be taken with a grain of salt, but, what would you say to people that, maybe want to get really excited about this team, and maybe they should, but what did you think of the performance?
I thought it was a really, really good performance. Obviously, in any season, you're going to play sometimes towards the upper range of your abilities in some games and down in others. But that said, it was a game where a lot of people were expecting a much closer result and against a solid team. So you should enjoy good wins when you get them.
The obvious thing that jumped out to me was the performance by the offensive line and J.K. Dobbins as well. Outside of it's funny because the first play of the game, Dobbins missed an obvious hole, and he kind of cut it back up and it wound up gained, I think, two yards on the play, when if he had kept it off tackle, he probably goes for at least a first down, maybe 15, 20 yards. And at that point, I was thinking, oh, boy, here we go again. But he really righted the ship, and it was a great performance, and he seemed to hit the holes as the game went along. And as I said last week, I thought physically he looked a lot better last week, but it's just a matter of running and seeing the field correctly. Did you think that this was a step forward, and does he realize maybe what he's been doing wrong in the past, and is he getting back on track?
I think he ran well. I mean, I think, to me, I guess I always take a step back and sort of look at like who's making the tackles, and so whether that's, and from that judging whether that's on the line, that's on the running back, that's on the play call. I thought the running game was really opened up once Justin Fields kept a couple of times, because Cincinnati was not even playing for the quarterback keep on the read. And once he did that for a couple of first downs, and they had to start using scrape exchanges and other things to account for the quarterback, that opened back up interior runs. And I also thought Ohio State did a nice job using outside zone, outside of the odd fronts that Cincinnati was using. And so I think those two things gave Dobbins the opportunity, whereas the week before, some of it was on the fact that FAU was sending unblocked defensive backs that were making the tackle.
You know, you mentioned the Justin Fields keeps a few times there early in the game. It really does seem, and we talked a little bit about it last week, I really get the impression Ohio State, within each game, they're going to run Justin Fields only up to a point they think is necessary, and then they're going to shut it down. It really felt like Cincinnati, as soon as that game started getting in hand, they took that away. I think that's what we're going to see every week. They'll run him only until they think it's necessary, and then it's like, all right, no more.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I think, and I think to that point, it has to remain in facet, because otherwise, just from what they do, there's just no other way to fully account for the arithmetic on the defense. And so it has to remain a part, and he's obviously a great athlete. But yeah, I think they're going to try to limit unnecessary hits as much as they can.
Ross, I want to ask you about something that KJ Hill talked about on Tuesday during interviews. I thought he was discussing how clearly the teams that they faced so far already are doing everything that they can in that zone defense to take away the short crossing routes that they killed Michigan with last year. And he said that they're going to have to adjust to that and kind of change their scheme and strategy a little bit. What do you think Ohio State will do to counteract that as we go forward?
Well, we saw some of that on Saturday. So Cincinnati did what a lot of opponents have done in what I'll call the Urban Meyer air, for lack of a better word. There's obviously a lot of continuity, which is try to cheat guys into the box on the edge to take away the zone read and to protect themselves because they're out athlete. They'll play a really soft zone with the corners, particularly on the wide field corner. And so Ohio State, Ryan Day has shown that he's more willing to take advantage of that than sometimes Ohio State was in the past. And so they threw a ton of comeback routes to that wide outside receiver or H out routes to Hill that really exploited that hole. So I think you'll see a lot of those as long as teams continue to want to try to gum up the middle of the field.
The defensive side of the ball, we wondered if what we saw against Florida Atlantic was legit. Ohio State looked really fast. They had a few tackling issues throughout the game, but for the most part, they were pretty solid all the way through. And then against Cincinnati, they really upped their performance and delivered a shutout. Neither Cincinnati nor Florida Atlantic have been able to run the ball, and neither team have gotten consistent long pass plays either. So through two games now, we have a better sample. What are you feeling about this Ohio State defense now as they delivered another great performance?
I think it has to start with the defensive line, which has shown an ability to consistently create pressure. And that, if you can create pressure up front, that makes it a lot easier to play defense. The second thing is they're going to make sure they're going to stop the run by making sure that the Will and Mike linebackers stay in the box and are playing the run first. I still continue to say, and as I said last week, maybe I'll be on here 2 weeks from now saying the same thing, but I still continue to believe that the 4-2-5 with the bullet and mixing coverages will become a bigger part of the scheme once they need it to, because they're still keeping things pretty simple by mixing cover 1 and cover 3. And that is leaving some holes that, even Cincinnati hit a couple of seam routes in between that middle of the field safety coverage. So I do think they're going to have to continue to expand the package, but obviously it's been a solid start.
Ross, the only thing I've seen that I don't know if it's a concern, but the only thing I've seen defensively that may rear its ugly head later in the year is they have, I think Chase Young especially, but on both sides, I think the contain on the outside has been a little rough a few times, and maybe a better team and a better quarterback or a better running back could have exploited that. But Ohio State has been suckered out of position a little bit there on the edge. Have you noticed that, and is that something that you would be worried about?
I can't say I've been extremely worried about it. I do think, again, that is somewhat a function of the scheme they're playing when you're in the cover 1 or cover 3 and you're covering up the slot and the tight end, and then you want to keep those 2 linebackers inside, basically covered up by the defensive tackles. That leaves you a bit weakened on the edge. And again, I think that's a function of what kind of falls under the, eventually they're going to have to expand the package, or what they're doing will start to get exploited as teams get more film on them. But I do think that's part of the playbook. So I don't think it's a problem. I just think it's going to be something that continues to evolve.
So, Ross, one of the things that really has stood out with this personnel so far is they're just so deep everywhere on defense. Defensive line, especially when they get healthy on the outside, linebackers, the way Baron Browning is playing and his versatility playing inside or outside, and then, of course, the defensive backfield, we know that as well. It really seems like everywhere it's shaping up for this defense to be too deep everywhere across the field, or more in some cases.
Yeah, well, and I mean, that's even putting the scheme aside. Sort of like the dirty little secret about last year is they were really young, and they have basically everyone back. And so, no matter what they were doing, they should be much better. And they're really helped by, I take a guy like Sean Wade, for example. His versatility really lets them do a lot of things, because they essentially are playing 3 corners on the field all the time.
So one quick question, I don't want to put you too much on the spot because I'm sure you haven't taken a lot of time to study Indiana, but this is a little bit different situation than the Indiana we saw when Kevin Wilson was there and they gave Ohio State a lot of fits offensively with the dual threat. The last 2 years, Ohio State has won by a combined 51 points under Tom Allen, so I don't think it's as big of a deal, but this Indiana team, although they don't throw it all that great, it is a program that has given them threats in the past. How do you expect Ohio State to respond to this team this week?
Yeah, I think Indiana's pretty solid. I think there's a decent chance that they're a bowl level team, and you're obviously playing your first road game of the year, which completely changes the dynamic. So again, I think you're dealing with a Indian offense that you need to be prepared to deal with a spread run game. And so I'll maintain my weekly prediction that we'll continue to see more of the bullet package as we move forward, and Ohio State has to face some of these offenses that can offer a little bit more dynamic running threats from both the running back and the quarterback.
Well, I tell you what, every time you mention Bullet, my man Johnny Bullet Lunsford just brings a big smile to his face. He loves himself that Bullet. So you are making Johnny very happy.
Hey, I'm happy you can do that for somebody.
Life is all about the smile. So, hey, Ross, I appreciate you taking the time. You can catch Ross Fulton on BuckeyeGrove.com. Of course, catch him on Twitter as well, Ross R. Fulton. Ross, I appreciate it, buddy.
Happy to do it, Kyle.
It's time to go inside Ohio State recruiting and take a peek behind the scenes with Buckeye Grove recruiting guru Mark Gibler and his magical orb of wonderment. They said it couldn't be done, but he's outdone himself once more. Back for another recruiting roundup.
That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
Mark, it never fails. You and Alex both got the jinx this week as you both just got done writing about a prospect and not expecting any action real soon in the immediate future. And then sure enough, your plan gets blown to shreds, and lo and behold, Ohio State gets a commitment from linebacker Reed Carrico of Ironton, Ohio. Let's jump right into that. Tell me about Carrico and his commitment. This seems like a pretty big deal for that 2021 class.
Oh yeah, this was their top linebacker target. Not just obviously in Ohio, but this was their guy. This was the guy they zeroed in on early, and they led the whole way. How much stock you want to put in the Clemson stuff? I personally didn't put a lot into it, but that was one school that he was certainly interested enough to go down and check out. They survived that visit, and it looked like he would initially was going to decide in August, and then the family kind of got together and thought maybe that's too early. Even though he was, pretty much set on Ohio State, kind of let's let things play out a little bit. Then they visited again on Saturday, left without committing, and it looked like, okay, this is probably going to go for a couple more months before he pulls the trigger, maybe go through the season or whatever. But I guess I think it was Sunday night. It was in the last 48 hours. He had a call with Ohio State and decided it was time. So he went home. They went home and I guess must have had a discussion about it as a family and just said, look, this is the school, and that was that. So big pickup. I almost feel like they're getting some of these 2021 guys so early that people aren't maybe appreciating it enough. Jack Sawyer's commitment should have been a much bigger deal. This one should be a big deal. These are really good players. I think Reed's pretty versatile. I could probably play a couple different of the linebacker positions, but I could see him in the middle just because he is a very physical, tough kid, but also runs well enough, can be a 3-down guy, which I think even with their base defense now, which is almost a nickel defense at this point, depending on, I guess, who they're playing, but you still want to have a Mike linebacker that can stay on the field if necessary, and I think he could do that. But he could play just about anywhere probably.
You said something very tantalizing over the weekend about Jack Sawyer, and I'm going to have you repeat it for those that aren't subscribers of Buckeye Grove and don't get to frequent the Horseshoe Lounge. Before I do that, actually, this seems like a good opportunity. By the way, if you are not a subscriber to BuckeyeGrove.com, they are running a promotion that you can get free access until November 26th, the day of the game. You can sign up doing that by putting in promo code BEATTTUN. Just sign up for a monthly or annual subscription. You'll get free access until then. If you sign up for the annual subscription and pay the $99 for an annual subscription, you'll also get an e-card to Adidas for $75. So take advantage of that access. You will get free access to the Horseshoe Lounge. You'll get Mark, Alex, you'll get Kirk, Nevada Buck, Ross's analysis. There are many, many reasons to take advantage of that. So I urge you and encourage you to join BuckeyeGrove.com with free access until November 26th. But Mark, so getting back to what I was saying about Sawyer, you described him in a certain way, and I want to paint this picture. Speaking of painting pictures, I'll use this analogy. Bob Ross, the infamous painter, used to paint those pretty little trees. So I want to go back to the tantalizing comments, how you described, in terms of comparison, Jack Sawyer. If you would, tell the listeners how you described him.
Well, I'm not one for hyperbole, so when I say something like this, I mean it. He is Nick Bosa in terms of technique, in terms of just understanding leverage, using his hands, motor, relentless effort, eats, sleeps, breathes football, and he is that in Joey Bosa's body because Joey has the better defensive end frame than Nick. Joey's the more physically impressive guy than Nick. Joey's the better, probably, overall athlete. So Jack is all the best things about Nick, but in Joey's body.
Yeah, I saw that comparison, and like you said, you're not one for hyperbole. So when I saw that, I kind of jumped out of my seat a little bit. I'm like, that's some pretty high praise, especially coming from Mark, who's very reserved about comparisons.
It just is. I mean, it just makes sense, and that's not take away from Joey at all as a football player or as a student of the game or whatever. But Joey's a little bit of a free spirit. Okay. So, he's kind of, he has other interests outside of football. He's kind of a different bird. Whereas Nick was just kind of laser focused on football. And Jack is that, but with Joey's, all of the physical talents that Joey has. And it's just, what he's doing right now is crazy. I mean, eight sacks in 2 games. They've played 2 really good teams with Division I offensive lineman type teams. Olentangy Liberty's got a couple of those. Clayton Northmont's got no shortage of talent. So he's not doing this against, Division VII, rural Ohio schools. He's doing this against playoff teams. Liberty's been in the Final Four the last 2 years. Northmont's been a playoff team. Also watched him at practice a few weeks ago, and just the way every practice rep was like the Super Bowl. It was so impressive to watch. And, the guy camped every day he was allowed to in June with Larry Johnson, came in and, could have been hanging out with his buddies or, playing AAU basketball, or there's a million things he could have been doing. And instead, would go over to the Woody and, get Larry Johnson's coaching for 5 hours and then go in and kind of go over some tape of it. It just, he's as good as I've seen in Ohio at this stage. And I'm not talking about in the class. I'm talking about the 10, 12 years I've been doing this now. Gosh, it's probably 12 now. He's as good as I've seen in Ohio at this point in his career.
That you made reference to this on Twitter on Tuesday. The 2021 class is just off to an insane start. The first 5 commitments they have between Carrico and Sawyer and Kyle McCord, quarterback, tackle Ben Chrisman, wide receiver Jaden Ballard, and then all of the guys that they're chasing in that class. As you said, we still don't know about the depth to compare it to a class like 2002, but the per star average right now looks to be, when you project down the road, looks to be, just out of this world.
Yeah, it's a great Ohio class, which is great for Day. And the comparison I made was when Jim Tressel took over. That 2002 Ohio class was very highly touted at the time. Obviously, it was very highly thought of when the recruiting process was going on, guys like Maurice Claret, but it also turned out to be fantastic. It ended up, it was something like in the mid-20s of guys who were drafted and played in the NFL or something out of that Ohio. It was crazy. It was a 25-man deep Ohio class, and Jim Tressel was able to get a lot of those guys that he wanted in that class, and that set the table for him to have a great run the next several years. And it's looking similar to that with what Ryan Day's got here in 21. And again, I don't know that we don't know yet the depth. We don't know what Ohio may look like 15 to 30, but we know 1 to 12 right now in 21 that Ohio is incredibly strong. And Ryan Day's got 4 of them already, plus Kyle McCord, obviously. All 4 of those guys are 4 stars or higher in the top 250, in the top 150, really. I think Carrico is actually the lowest at like 148. And he he's a guy who could, has some upward mobility just because, competition level is not great in high school. Wasn't seen a lot this summer camp-wise. So, still kind of piecing that one together, I think, from an evaluation standpoint, but has a chance to move up. So it's rolling, and it's going to be a smaller class for Ryan Day than in 2020 right now. So as this starts to fill up a little bit, they'll be able to get really selective here out of state.
Ryan, Mark, I don't want to. Yeah, Mark, I'm going to call you Ryan. I don't want to get caught up in the prisoner of the moment type stuff, but there was a guy that I've been asked about since we're on the subject of the 2021 class that we haven't talked about here on the show before. I want to ask you about where Ohio State stands with arguably the best player in the country, Corey Foreman, because it does seem outwardly that they have some momentum with them and they're doing really well. And I know this is pretty far down the road, so it's not like even if they are doing well, we shouldn't expect a commitment in the next month or two. But I am curious where they stand with him and how much of a factor you think Ohio State will be with his recruitment going further down the process.
They have his attention, and I saw him a couple weeks ago. I was out in LA. I watched him. I talked to him after the game. Saw him at the opening of the summer. So I've been around him a little bit. They have his attention. For me, I don't start sounding any alarms with California kids until they visit. When he flies all the way across the country to Columbus to check things out, I will put more stock into it. But they definitely has attention. He definitely, is a big fan of what they've done in terms of getting guys to the NFL. He's noticed it, not just at his position. He's noticed it across the board. That was one of the things he's mentioned to me in the past is how impressed he is with how many guys they've put in the NFL. And I think when you look this year and then you see what Chase Young is going to do as long as he stays healthy, knock on wood, and then you look at maybe getting Jonathan Cooper back here soon, and he should have a good year. And then you look at what Tyreek Smith is showing people right now and what he could be like in a year from now. That should only help them with some of these 2021 guys, especially when in 20, it doesn't look like they're going to take a ton of pure defensive ends. And so if you're a 21 guy, you're going to have a chance to be in the two deep pretty early in your career. And so I think they have a lot of things that line up for them that if they can sell him on it, they can be a contender, but they've got to get him out here first. These California guys can talk all they want about Ohio State, but until they kind of put their money where their mouth is, like Clark Phillips did and like Port Williams did, you kind of just have to wait and see.
So this past weekend, Ohio State had some 2020 guys to speak of. The one I want to ask you about specifically, Michael Drennan, with Ohio State clearly needing a running back in this class, or clearly searching for a running back, maybe needing, I guess you could argue as well. Michael Drennan from Dublin Kaufman here in Central Ohio was on campus. What is the situation with Drennan and Ohio State right now?
Yeah, they're just kind of plugging away there as far as wanting to get him on campus more and more, get around him more. He didn't visit over the summer really. He didn't camp. He's got a bit of call it a leg injury. I don't want to put him in a bad spot here. I think he's gonna be back on Friday actually. So I don't think it's a long-term thing from where we're at right now. But so I think they want to see him on film a little bit this fall. They certainly want to continue to build that relationship. He's got a great relationship with Tony Alford. Tony's son and Mike are friends. They hang out together. They go to each other's house. So there's a good relationship there in terms of Alford, but just in getting around the rest of the staff, getting Ryan Day is going to have to get in there and get to know him and the family a little bit better. And so right now he's I hate to give almost a non-answer, but it's like he's one of 8, 10, 12 guys, whatever it is they're looking at right now. And there is not a favorite at this point. I think one thing that's interesting is now that they are in the situation they're in with Robinson at Texas and Knighton at Florida State, will they actually take two? That's kind of something I think is being debated right now. They certainly are going to take a feature back type of guy, which is actually not Drennan. He's more of an all-purpose guy. He's more DeMario McCall than Marcus Crowley. But so that's going to be an interesting thing here is, if they just look at it and say, well, we wanted two, but if we can't get two at the top of our board, do we just take one and then kick the can down the road a little bit to 21, which then makes 21 really important. But, so there's a lot of stuff, a lot of moving parts there right now with running back recruiting. And I think we're at least another month or two away from anything with Drennan really picking up in either direction. I think he's got to put some stuff on tape this fall. They'll continue to try and love him up and get him on campus while evaluating the other guys. And Kevontre Bradford, the kid out of Texas, is making his official visit the weekend of October 4th from Michigan State. So that's another guy they want to evaluate still, and they want to get him up here, and they want to, these visits like this, when it's the first one and it's an official, it's a two-way interview. They've got to impress the kid and the kid's got to impress them. So, there's a lot of stuff going on right now, and I still think we're a month or two away from any type of clarity. And
Mark, the other kid that they had on campus locally in the 2020 class this past weekend that you pointed out, Quan Magwood of Walnut Ridge, you think his path, if he gets an opportunity to join the Ohio State class in 2020, you think his path is probably defensively?
I think so. He thinks so. The coaches haven't come right out and said that, but I think Keon's reading between the lines here. He sees that they've got 4 big-time receivers. They're probably pretty happy with that right now. And plus you have Cameron Martinez, and you don't know if that's going to be an H offer or a safety offer yet. That's going to be get him on campus and figure it out later. So I think he's done some of his own research and is assuming that, but I think he's probably right on that. They need at least one more defensive back. He's got a lot of versatility, though. He can play H. He could play safety. He could play I think he's got a shot to play corner, maybe more of a slot corner than a true outside guy, but definitely I think could play corner. And he's a really physical kid. I mean, if he's a year away as far as like Coach Mick's strength program. With 1 year with Marotti, he would be about the size Jabril Peppers was, and Jabril Peppers was the bullet guy for Madison and the Michigan defense a few years ago. So there's 3 or 4 spots he could find a way in. I mentioned, I think the thing that would really open it up for him is if Ohio State does not successfully flip Ryan Watts from Oklahoma, the 4-star cornerback. But I don't think that's his only path. I think, even if they flipped Watts, there's always that late spot for the Ohio kid that they love that has a great senior year. We've seen this a million times. We've seen it with Thayer Munford, Malik Harrison. We've seen it with a lot of guys. And I think there's a chance that could happen for him too. So I don't want to close the door on him and have it completely based on what they do with Ryan Watts. But there's a couple paths there, and he's going to wait. I mean, that's the other thing. He's going to wait. He's going to wait till December. They can come in late, I think, and still do what they need to do here. He's not trying to lock down a spot right now.
So, Mark, before I let you go, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of sound off what you've seen from Ohio State so far through 2 games. First, let me ask you, where is Justin Fields in relation to where you expected him to be early in the season? I know it's a limited sample, not trying to get you to make any proclamations of this is what he is or will be, but is he further along? Where is he in relation to where you expected to see from him?
He has been better than I thought, even more consistent than I thought he might be at the beginning of the year. Is that competition level? I don't know. I tend to think Cincinnati's a decent team. We'll see if that's right or wrong over the next few weeks, but I'm encouraged. I think the decision-making has been really good. He has not really there are very few. I mean, maybe the ball was ever in any jeopardy at all. Every throw he's made has been caught or put in a spot where if his guy's not going to get it, nobody's going to get it. So he's been really good with the decision-making. He's obviously very athletic. We knew that. The accuracy, in my opinion, has been very good. So I've been and I expect a lot out of him by the time he leaves Columbus. I do. So I'm not, I expect him to be an elite player, but it feels like he's a little bit maybe ahead of where I thought. I thought we'd see some rough patches early, and we haven't yet. And maybe we will this week. I don't know, but I just thought we'd see a little maybe inconsistency at the beginning. And so far, that's been really good. He's been outstanding.
They really have been very few and far between thus far. Are you more, let me put it this way, should Ohio State fans, what is more likely to continue? What we're seeing from the defense in the way that they're just reacting and flying to the football right now, or the way the run game took off against Cincinnati with Dobbins doing a little better job of hitting holes, the holes being there in the first place, and then him hitting them and getting to the second level of the defense? What do you think in your mind is more likely to continue? Not that it's either or, but what is more likely of the two?
I have felt over the past few months, so this is a little, maybe some confirmation bias at work here, but I have always felt this particular roster should have a lights out defense. You have everything you could need what do you want to have a dominant defense? You need to be able to rush the passer. They can do that. They have a lot of guys that can rush the passer. You need to be able to lock things down on the outside. Jeffrey Okudah is, if not the best cornerback in the country, one of the top couple. He's going to be a first-round pick next year. You've got a veteran in Damon Arnett. You've got another freak in Sean Wade. You've got a veteran safety in Jordan Fuller. You've got veteran linebackers. You got a guy like Malik Harrison who things seem to click for even towards the end of last year, and that's carried over. So for me, there's no reason they shouldn't have a dominant defense. They have speed, they have athleticism, they have toughness, they have smart guys back there. There is no reason their defense should not be one of the best in the country. So that to me is the most likely to continue. And that's not to say that the running game can't continue to click. I love what they've got up front, especially on that interior. I mean, Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis are just nasty guys. But this defense is so talented, and you're going to get some guys back here. I mean, Tyreek Smith's basically still on a pitch count. Tyler Friday's just getting there, and Jonathan Cooper is going to be back at some point here. So there's no reason this defense shouldn't continue to take off.
That really is scary for opponents to think that Ohio State potentially could go 5 or 6 deep on the end and 6 or 7 deep inside. You're talking about, not that they're going to play that many guys, but you're talking about legitimately having 8, 9, 10, 11 really solid contributors up front if those ends get healthy. And I think that is a great luxury to have, because they can keep guys really fresh throughout entire games.
And they can do that all over the board. I mean, that's the crazy thing. Like, Baron Browning can come in and spell Borland or Harrison, which he's been doing. You have so Browning gives you versatility across the linebackers. You have 6 or 7 in the secondary that can play. I mean, you've got Fuller, White, Wade, Okudah, and Arnett. But Josh Proctor, if Josh Proctor has to play this year, that's not a problem. Like, you want to stay healthy, and you certainly don't want an injury by any means. But if Josh Proctor is forced into action, that is not going to be an issue. So they have several guys, and I think they like some of those young corners too. But it's just a matter of continuing to grow and build kind of chemistry as a defense, and any new wrinkles the staff can kind of inject into things, because I know they've been playing pretty much base. They've been keeping it pretty vanilla on both sides of the ball so far. So I'm kind of curious to see what wrinkles they can throw in here once we get maybe towards the end of the month, go through that Nebraska, Michigan State stretch where it gets tricky. So yeah, they're all the talent is there, all the pieces are there on defense. You just need a sound scheme and guys who know what they're doing, and they seem to have that now. Baron Browning looks like a different human right now, and that was kind of a point of contention for me the last 2 years, was how on earth someone as talented and athletic as Baron Browning couldn't be productive, and we're seeing, with Al Washington now and just a simpler maybe scheme, we're seeing him kind of start to blossom into what he can be. So it's interesting that they've been lights out, and there's a lot of upside still.
Yeah, they look like they're about to click. So who knows if it'll continue? The competition is certainly going to get a lot better very, very soon. But right now, it's a good early sign for what may be to come for Ohio State defense. Mark, I appreciate you joining us. You can read his work, of course, on BuckeyeGrove.com. As I said earlier, if you are not already a subscriber, please take advantage of the free access until November 26th. Sign up with the promo code BTTUN, and you can also catch him on Twitter at MarkGiblerBG. Mark, I appreciate it, as always, and we will catch you again very, very soon.
All right, thanks, man.
So that will put a wrap on the Unscripted Ohio podcast for today. Reminder, tomorrow we have the Scarlet and Gray podcast coming up with Corey and Johnny Bullitt, as well as episode number 3 of the Gridiron Game Time with Shane Larson, talking about the college football. Plenty to unwrap. The LSU offense, is it for real? Shane will dive into that. Joe Burrow, the former Ohio State quarterback, making good down in Baton Rouge. So, yeah, we've got 2 great podcasts coming up. I'll be back on Friday as I preview the Indiana-Ohio State showdown Saturday in Bloomington. That is a noon kickoff on Fox. I'm going to preview that with my man Galen Clavio. He is the host of the Crimson Cast. They are a podcast that is on the Indiana affiliate of the Rivals Network. So looking forward to previewing IU-OSU with Galen on Friday. As I said, tomorrow, Scarlet and Gray podcast, Gridiron Game Time, and then I'll be back on Friday. And then it is game day on Saturday. You can catch Unscripted Ohio Network of podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Just search for Unscripted Ohio and then give us a follow. And hopefully you'll be glad you did if you are just hearing this as a one-off. We've got 5 days of programming, 7 total episodes a week. Plenty of sports to digest here on Unscripted Ohio. You can give me a follow on Twitter at KYLam8, or you can follow the Unscripted Ohio Twitter account at Unscripted Ohio and the number 1. You can also follow us on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/unscriptedohio. That's going to do it for me. As I said, I'll be back on Friday. Enjoy your week, everybody.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.